Hello, John. Today we're going to talk about three people from olden times. But before we do that, you're going to show us another one of your lovely paintings. And this one I see in the red there, it says first prize. Can you tell us about that?
That's right, Oliver. Good morning. That was a painting that I did in 2010 on a holiday in France, which we went to pretty regular for some years, from 2009 onwards, or even before that. But we went to France and usually Brittany. But this was a canal that runs for 200 to 300 miles in Brittany from a place where we were, which was near Rosstrenan, a nice town with supermarkets, etc. But we were actually in a place called Melione, and this was a canal quite near it, with lovely walks for as long as you wanted to walk along paths on the far side and this side. So I did a painting of that tranquil scene, and I titled it, which is a Christian tradition, near restful waters he leadeth me.
When you say it's a Christian tradition?
Well, it's a Catholic tradition. Near restful waters he leadeth me. It means time for contemplation, perhaps meditation, or whatever it is that you get when you are near water. Reflection. And this is what the way I felt walking along with my wife, Julie, along this canal. And from time to time, particularly at the weekend, you would find other people, particularly French families, walking leisurely along this. It was a beautiful canal with here and there lock houses, which of course now were occupied by people, and a very tranquil sight.
Very excellent, John. Okay, so the first person we're going to talk about from olden times, he was an Irish playwright, he was a novelist, and he was a poet. And he lived up to his surname. Of course, I'm talking about the great Mr. Oscar Wilde.
Correct. Oscar Wilde was a famous playwright in London, and was one of the most sought after and popular people in that melting pot of London. He was married to a lady and had a couple of children, but he also had an assignment or a liaison with one of the gentry, Lord Douglas, or whatever his name was, I forget, but I know he was the son of the Marquess of Queensberry. So a court case resulted from that, but we won't go into that. Oscar said one time, he was born in Ireland, in Dublin, and educated in the north of Ireland in Protestant school there, Portport or something. And his father was a surgeon with a title, Sir Wilde. So he come from a fairly privileged background. But one of the things he said in regard to Irish people was, Irish people, he said, are very fair-minded. They never speak well of one another. Now, whether he was very observant or whether that situation obtains today, I don't know. But that's what Oscar said. My experience growing up was quite the reverse of that people were actually very friendly and great neighbours. That still obtains in different parts of the country, but it's not as common as it was in my young days. People now, with the onset of television and various other tools of the mass media, do not call as frequently to their neighbour as they did heretofore. So Oscar said that in those olden times, along with many other sayings.
Is it possible, I mean, he came from a kind of an aristocratic, upbringing. Is it possible that he was detached from most of society and that's why he said it, or perhaps he said it in a more whimsical manner?
Correct. I'd say his observations would be limited, but growing up in Ireland, even though his class seemed to lead a fairly sheltered and very materialistic type of life, when the majority didn't enjoy those facilities. As a matter of fact, they lived in very humble circumstances. So his views might just mirror perhaps the class he lived among. But one speaks about one's own experience of life, and I hope that his view is not prevalent. And though if one listens to the Dáil, the speeches in the Dáil, there seems to be no love lost between quite a few of the members of that parliamentary meeting place. So that was Oscar.
So Oscar died in the year 1900. It was the 30th of November, as far as I know. And then 23 days later, another great Irish baby was born. And of course, that is Mr. Noel Purcell.
Correct. Noel Purcell was a famous, well-known actor and film star in his own manner. He appeared in the Carry On films, which were comedies, and he had a distinctive voice. I met Noel Purcell. He lived in Sandymount. I often saw him around Sandymount, but I met Noel Purcell with his companion Hector Gray, who had a couple of shops in Liffey Street in which you could buy anything at good value, all sorts of not hardware type items that you mightn't get in a traditional store. And he used to often, Hector himself was a showman, he used to have a meeting in which he acted as an auctioneer on along the quays, Ormond Quay there, near where the Dublin woolen mill used to be, and he'd be holding forth there on the Sunday morning and selling stuff and people bidding. So he was a character. So I met Noel Purcell and his sidekick Hector Gray one time after a race meeting in Leopardstown in Dublin. They sojourned to the Punch Bowl public house, which was in Booterstown, and I happened to be there one Saturday afternoon or evening when Noel Purcell and Hector Gray came in. Well, the conversation was very humorous, and really the sort of conversation that I remember that often took place in public houses and places of that calibre in those times. The television didn't seem to hold any sway. Nobody was looking at football or racing or anything like this. They were talking, and one could say they talked the hind legs off an ass. But Noel also did the famous Dublin Psalter it was called. Grafton Street's a wonderland, there's magic in the air, there are diamonds in the lady's eyes and gold dust in her hair, and if you don't believe me, come and meet me there in Dublin on the sunless morning. This was Noel Purcell, and he painted a picture of Dublin, which is not this like it was. Grafton Street was full of a lot of family type stores in those times, and Beauty's was a haunt where you went in for a cup of coffee. I well remember it when I was young. So that was Noel Purcell.
So we're going to move on to a man who you said to me there a while back you believed he was a spiritual type of man, and we're talking about William Shakespeare.
That's right. William Shakespeare, he was a poet and a playwright that we studied when we were doing our English in secondary schools in my young days, and when I was getting a secondary school education, which was fortunate because not many got a secondary school education when I was young. But Shakespeare was on the menu for this study, And I found him a very interesting character in many ways. For example, one of the things he said about absent friends. And we have friends that are absent and perhaps in some other jurisdiction, some other country, or perhaps gone to meet their maker. But Shakespeare said, they flash upon the inward eye. And in the bliss of solitude. So he thought about his friends that were absent. I think in his case they were probably gone to meet their maker. The other thing he said was, or that he said was, all the world's a stage and all the men and women merely players. They have their exits and their entrances. They have their exits and their entrances. Let's just, let's see. You have their exits and their entrances. He also says that they stood and fret their hour upon the stage, and then are heard no more. He paints a picture of life that you're active for a period, whatever way it is, whether you make a name for yourself or whether you don't, or wherever it is, and then that's the end of it. So he sort of opened up your mind, even as a young person, to other possibilities. And some of the phrases that he used, which, you know, just have escaped me just for temporarily, did give food for thought, and often gave one the impression that Shakespeare was a closet Catholic because he was during the persecution.
A closet Catholic?
Yeah, in other words, he had to keep it quiet.
Wow.
I mean, people that practiced the Catholic faith during the persecution at what is called Reformation, when Henry VIII lost his head, I think he was mad, and Cromwell gave aid and abetted him and killed their own people, murdered them over there in England, including the famous Chancellor of the Exchequer, St. Thomas More, who wouldn't support the nonsense that they come out with. So this was the period that Shakespeare was writing.
Okay.
So you couldn't declare your Catholic identity. You were up to the scaffold before you had time to say your prayers.
Thank you very much, John, for discussing those three wonderful, imaginative people.
You're most welcome.